You're watching Amador County's local television network, TSPN.
Hello, I'm Mark Montgomery, and it's been a few weeks since I've been here, so we have a lot to catch up on. I don't have a clue how far I'm going to get, of course, during this segment, but there's a number of miscellaneous things I would like to cover. But first, you can reach me or hear me on Money 105.5 in the mornings out of Sacramento from 7 to 9. That's an FM station. And on Saturdays, 1380 KTKZ from 8 to 10 every Saturday morning. So please tune in. It's also live streamed, podcast. You can go to smallbiztalkradio.com, and all the information is there. You know, in the newspapers recently, we saw all the lightning flashes and all the flooding and all the rains and all the winds and everything hitting Washington, D.C. and all the power outages. But what really caught my eye was the headline: what global warming or climate change looks like. So in other words, they get some major storms coming through, some major flooding, some major winds, electrical storms, etc., and whoa, boy, this is different. This is record-breaking, which some of it was. Record-breaking heat. They say in over 3,000 locations, 3,000 records broken. Probably about any day of the year, you can probably find where records are being broken somewhere. Yes, these storms were unusual, but to tie it to global warming or climate change, it's Mother Nature. Now, with that said, that was happening in the United States. Now, while it was super hot back east, if many of you think about it, it's been very cool here. Now we're getting into some temperatures. We'll have a few days over 100 degrees, which is pretty normal, you know, for this area this time of year. Matter of fact, last summer, the whole summer was relatively cool. Matter of fact, I had few tomatoes on my vines. So I guess that's climate change also, even though it was an enjoyable summer last year. And so far, this summer's been enjoyable. But that's this country. What they don't tell you is, well, it will rain till September, is this headline. Well, of course, this is out of the UK. This is UK news, United Kingdom overseas. Just want to read you this for one moment. It says Britain is facing its worst ever summer with cold, wet weather, ruining family holidays and blighting the Olympics, forecasters warned last night. Now, this is, of course, a couple of weeks ago now. August is set to be a washout following a miserable July and the wettest June since records began, meaning summer is effectively over. So they've had an incredibly cold summer, or are having, in Britain. We're having a warm one, they're having a cold one. I don't know, in my mind, it kind of just washes out each other to where it's, we've got climate change, Mother Nature is doing her thing, which, by the way, she's been doing for the last few billion years. So I really don't know what the change is. Now, the real question comes up, maybe we are warming off and on. I don't know. Now, the trend is what the experts are saying is, actually, we've been in a cooling trend for the last 10 years. Alaska had some of this last winter, the coldest weather, the most snow, the most ice for the longest period of time. They have more snow, and actually they had icebreakers in to break the ice up in ports and so on up in Alaska. So, you know what? My opinion, normal. It's everyday something. It's just everyday occurrence on this earth. So, for what that's worth, you know, they always overblow the headlines, but I had to bring it up because here again, what do the headlines show? Global warming, climate change, and this is what it looks like. Looks like that every day. If you go out there, I guess the nice weather, the 100-degree weather we're having today, climate change. Because it didn't happen last year at this same time on this day, something has changed. It just doesn't make any sense. Something else, California insurers lost billions on workers' comp last year. Now, I actually had my sister on my radio show this last week. She was in town. She is a workers' comp attorney. And so I thought, well, you know what? She's been doing this for years. I'm going to have her on the show and talk about workers' comp. What's going on? Because as small businesses, we're seeing our rates start to climb. And we're going to continue seeing it climb. Why? Well, because we have progressive liberals in Sacramento. That's bottom line. They're open to it. We know things go up. Well, this is no different. So I had my sister in to talk about this because this went on to say, it says, new ammunition emerged Tuesday, this here again a couple of weeks ago, for a behind-the-scenes political battle shaping up over California's multi-billion-dollar system of compensating workers for job-related injuries and illnesses, as it fuels the campaign of insurers to increase premiums and suggests that they may form an alliance with unions, medical providers, and attorneys for injured workers to overhaul, again, the word overhaul, the workers' compensation reform enacted 8 years ago. Now, if you remember, this was one of the reasons I decided to get on the radio and start talking about things, because I've been hammered, and most businesses in California, with workers' comp fees. It's incredibly expensive. Even after they reduced the insurance premiums, and this had to do with the Schwarzenegger administration, they pushed it back, and actually it was a godsend. It saved us a lot of money. But we're seeing them come back up, and of course back then they were overhauling the workers' comp system. What bothers me now is because they're starting to see these premiums creeping up, and there's a reason for it, now they're talking about, well, we need to overhaul workers' compensation again. Well, what was enacted 8 years ago to overhaul it is going to be very different if they overhaul it this time, because I'll guarantee you if they overhaul it again, their so-called overhaul, with a Democratic administration, you're going to see fees even go up more. So, anyway, when my sister was on my radio program, I asked her a simple question. Why are these costs starting to go back up? And it's the same old answer. Fraud, bogus claims, expensive claims, people unemployed. They're going to get laid off, or they've been laid off because of the economy, and they're looking for ways to compensate themselves. So if they're going to be laid off, all of a sudden, oh man, their back's hurting, they've got something going on with them, and it's all work-related, so they go on workers' comp and basically make a living at it. But again, what surprised me that she brought up, and I'm not going to belabor this, but were the doctors that are part of the scheme. The workers' comp that we are charged in our fees because doctors play this game. And there are some of the attorneys, the legal profession, and the doctors in many ways have things kind of going on between themselves. And they are soaking the system for, frankly, billions of dollars. And who pays that? You and I, the business owner. So it's something to keep an eye on, and it's something to be aware of, because this is one of the reasons that businesses don't come to California. Businesses don't expand and hire additional people. If every person they hire is going to cost them more on workers' comp and their insurance premium is going to go up, then, well, they're going to hire fewer people. Or maybe they won't manufacture certain products and expand their manufacturing business because their workers' comp is going to go up too high. So anyway, this enters into small businesses' business plan. Disability. Now, I talked about this once before on the show, and I'm going to just have a few minutes in this segment to close this out. Disability ranks outpace new jobs in Obama recovery. We're seeing a so-called recovery. We're seeing people that are going off the rolls of looking for jobs. Therefore, we have seen, although it's bumped back up now, we have seen the unemployment rate go down. Of course, it went down to 8, then it went to 8.1, now it's back up to 8.2, and I'm willing to bet it's going to continue right on up until election time. But why? Here's another reason. Social Security, folks, is broke. And matter of fact, there's speculation there's only a few more years. Frankly, they're going in the red now. Part of it is basically the tax credits that we're getting, and it's actually coming out of Social Security, which didn't make any sense to me when they were doing it in the first place. But then again, there's no trust fund anyway. It all goes into the general fund, so it doesn't make a big difference. But anyway, here's an interesting statistic. It says the number of new disability enrollees has climbed 19% faster than the number of new jobs created during the sluggish recovery. What this is saying is that people are going on Social Security disability. And why? Well, because they're claiming stress. That's one of the big ones, because they've lost their unemployment benefits, causing stress in the family, mental stress. So now they're claiming that they have a disability, the doctors are backing it up, and now they're going on to Social Security disability. And we're talking people, millions. 3.1 million workers signed up for disability benefits. That's huge. So, for what it's worth, Social Security is just going to go broke that much sooner. So, coming up, the new job statistics came out. Most of you have probably heard of this. We're going to talk about this in the next segment. Employers add just 80,000 jobs in June. So, the rate stays at 8.2%. So, we're going to be talking about that when we come back in the next segment. And again, for the third straight month, the week is, well, pardon me, hiring is weak and the economy is struggling. So we're going to talk about this and more just as soon as we come back. I'm Mark Montgomery.
The Mark Montgomery Show. You're watching Amador County's local television network, TSPN.
Welcome back, folks. I'm Mark Montgomery, and just in the last segment we were talking about the creation of 80,000 jobs. Wow, for the month of June. The reason I bring this up is that earlier in the week we were hearing from so-called economists that, well, they're speculating that we're going to have 174,000, 175,000 jobs created in the month of June. That was their speculation. And so many people that don't pay attention during the week, they hear certain numbers, the news media picks up on this, and they're saying, well, you know, they expect 174,000, 175,000 jobs to be created in June. Not bad. But then the numbers come out, really, 80,000 in the month of June, which is a horrible number. And that's the reason I bring it up. Another reason I bring it up is because I had a person that was on my show one time. Well, this was probably about a month ago, and we were talking about these unemployment numbers. And what he was telling me is that he owned a company, and he would have about 50 people working on a particular project. Now, when that project is complete, and they close it out, and he moves those 50 now that work for the company, and move them to another project over here, those are new jobs created. Even though these people have worked with him for years, they become new jobs because the project changed, not that they hired new people. So these numbers, even at 80,000, are bogus numbers. The reason I bring it up? I don't believe a thing that the government is telling me anymore, because they manipulate the numbers. They come up with kind of a bogus way of planning it. And as I've said so many times before in my program, we could easily get quickly to 100% employment in this country. Overnight, practically. All we have to do is to put everyone on unemployment, then off of unemployment, tell them not to look for a job, and voila, because they're no longer looking for a job, we have 100% employment statistically. Doesn't make any sense. That's why these numbers are all bogus. I wouldn't believe a thing that I see, you know, when it comes to these numbers. Same thing right here in California. I keep hearing that we are in some kind of a recovery here in California. We see employment going up. And yet the stories that I hear coming out are really bad stories on people being laid off, people not worried whether the doors are going to be open next month, next week. They don't know where their next job is going to come from, and I'm talking business-wise. It just doesn't make any sense that we're hearing one thing, but when you're looking in the field and you're talking to people and listening to people, you're not getting the same story that you're getting from government. So something is awry, and what is awry? Government. Pure and simple. And I am not an anti-government person. What I am is I want reasonable government, but most of all, I would really prefer honest government, to tell it the way it is. And another thing is stop the tax and spend policies and get out of my life. Back off, take a breather so the private sector can actually get back on its feet. That's what I would like to see. Something else that came to my attention here a few days ago, Government Motors, which of course is GM. GM shares near record low. Taxpayers' loss on bailout rises to $35 billion. Makes Solyndra look sick, doesn't it? But what's amazing to me is that people look at GM and they think, wow, but we saved all of these jobs. Folks, what we did is bail out a union is what we did. We also shafted the bondholders with General Motors and Chrysler, frankly. Bondholders should have come first and been able to go into bankruptcy and protect their position. The Obama administration stepped in and said, bondholders, hey, you're worthless as far as we're concerned. The union workers who we're here to save, they'd come before you. I believe that's probably the first time in history that's ever happened, that the government stepped in. GM should have gone through a normal bankruptcy or a Chapter 11 or 13, whatever they call it for the corporations, because that way the pensions and everything would have been rolled into a settlement. GM probably would have come out of it just fine and actually in better shape that they are in now without taxpayer dollars. But now taxpayers are looking at about a $35 billion loss. They will probably never recoup it. When the government sold the first number of shares in GM, started the new IPO, sold so many of the shares, they sold for approximately around $33 and something. I don't remember the exact number, but about 33 bucks. Last I checked, GM was at around $19 and something. So the value has gone down. The union workers, though, however, are receiving bonuses. Now, how in the world does a company that owes $35 billion, or whatever it is, or $20 billion to the federal government, back to the taxpayers, pay bonuses? I don't understand that. So it saved their pensions, saved their jobs, they get bonuses, and we, the taxpayers, here again, are taking the loss. Don't understand it, but that is government today if you allow it. And of course, the point that I'm also getting to is that your vote counts. Think about how you vote. Are you okay with these policies? Whether it's national or here in the state of California. Here's something else. If you voted for the current administration, Border Patrol. We hear what's going on our borders, right? Secure our borders, put up the fence. We've heard about Fast and Furious with the Border Patrol officer being shot and killed with guns supplied by the federal government. And that's a whole other story, and I'm not going to get into that. But one of the things that you don't hear mentioned is that the potential, and we don't have numbers on it, of the hundreds of Mexicans, citizens that have been killed by these guns that were basically allowed to cross the border through this Fast and Furious government giving guns away, basically, with no tracking device in the guns, by the way. There's another side to this story, but I'm not going to go there. But here's what I am going to talk about. It says Border Patrol Union blast Homeland Security instructions to run away and hide from gunmen. This is amazing to me. Now, it goes on, it says, Border Patrol agents in Arizona are blasting their bosses for telling them, along with all other departments of Homeland Security employees, to run and hide if they encounter an active shooter. Now, you would think that this is, well, you could maybe buy into this if it's just employees that don't have guns. Get the heck out of there, hide somewhere, don't get yourself shot. But when you go further into this, it actually covers agents that are Border Patrol agents. So it goes on, it says, it's one thing to tell civilian employees to cower under a desk if a gunman starts spraying fire in a confined area, says members of Tucson Local 2544 National Border Patrol Council. But to give armed law enforcement professionals The same advice is downright insulting. The instructions from DHS come in the form of pamphlets and a mandatory computer tutorial. We are now taught in an active shooter course that if we encounter a shooter in a public place, we are to run away and hide, Union leader Brandon Judd wrote on the website of 3,300-member Union Local. If we are cornered by such a shooter, we are to, only as a last resort become aggressive and throw things at him or her. We are then advised to call law enforcement and wait for their arrival, presumably while more innocent victims are slaughtered. So, bottom line is here we go again with Department of Homeland Security coming down with instructions that have no basis in reality. To tell our agents, now I have to say that I'm a little suspect here. I can't imagine that they would tell someone with a gun that is trained that they've got to run away and hide. But I tell you, with looking at what is going on in our government today, I would not be surprised that if, say, a Border Patrol agent didn't run and hide and actually killed an assailant that is spraying fire somewhere, the chances are the Border Patrol agent might be in jail because he didn't follow Homeland Security's orders to run and hide. Didn't make any difference if, 20 people were killed. The chances are that this Border Patrol agent that stood his ground and fired back, killing maybe an assailant, that he might be the one in trouble. So, anyway, it says it is always comforting to know that for those of us who carry a weapon when we are off duty, if we should encounter such a situation, stop a shooter and save countless lives, we can look forward to being disciplined or fired by the Border Patrol because we should have run away to hide and then maybe thrown objects at the deranged killer instead of taking action and stopping him with a firearm, the Union Local's website says. So there's a lot of confusion. Now, this is another point. If this particular policy causes confusion, it's in the confusion of policy that people get killed. And that's the danger of all of this. Does an agent have time to second-guess a policy? What do they really mean? I've got a shooter at hand now, killing people. What should I do? Should he think about it, or should he just react? And of course, what I look at is, of course he should just react. But the problem is because, well, you know what this really boils down to? Probably written by attorneys. And the attorneys, of course, which run our war-making policies, our fighting policies that restrain our, that create the policies that our military operates by now, which is getting many of our young men killed, by the way. You don't hear a lot about it, but it is happening. Now they're giving instructions to the Border Patrol to run and hide. Because we don't have any lawsuits here. If you kill a shooter, well, you know what, just think of all the legal fees and all the problems you're going to cause. So consequently, just run and hide. That's what we want you to do. And that's, of course, what we have coming down from today's administration. I'm Mark Montgomery, and we'll be back for another segment in just a few moments.
You're watching Amador County's #1 news and sports leader, TSPN.
Welcome back, folks. And just briefly, I want to mention a website to you. It talks about, it's funny, this was in the State Worker out of the Bee here about a week ago. And it says, mysterious website calls unions, which of course I've been calling them this for ages, the new California bandits. And what I found interesting about this is that they're trying to investigate who this really is. We've got the Bee and people trying to find out who these mysterious people are. They are calling California unions California bandits. Can't have that. Heck no, these people are not bandits. Well, the website is, and that's why I'm talking about it, is because, hey, I just soon you go there and find out that they are bandits. So it is the new CaliforniaBandits.com. It's called the new CaliforniaBandits.com. Now, it's out of Florida. And what's kind of interesting is that here again, they tried to investigate this. Says the anti-tax, anti-organized labor websites blast the union plan to raise taxes, calls out union bosses, and publishes the pay of top officials for the AFSCME, the California Federation of Teachers, the California Teachers Association, the SEIU, and the California Nurses Association, and more. Says the site gives similar treatment to the Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment, which was formerly the California Chapter Association of Community Organizations for Reform, of course known as ACORN. So it says the liberal and politically active group isn't a union but has strong ties with labor, of course ACORN. So it says visitors to the website are invited to report a bandit. So in other words, if they visit the website and you know of something, report them. So anyway, it says the state worker is continuing to investigate the website's source. Why? What's the big deal? Who cares? It's a website. Now, if they were selling, I don't know, fresh eggs or something, would you be investigating it? But you've got the state worker, the bee, investigating a website. Now, what they found out, of course, was, well, it just referred them to Domain Discrete Privacy Service. So in other words, which I've done also, is that you just go ahead and say, you know what? I don't want this to be made public. I don't want the fact that I own this domain name to be put out in public. But, and to answer your question, I know it's come up, no, this is not one of my sites. But it's an interesting concept that you have to somewhat go undercover, in a sense, to be able to publish this. Can you imagine if they really knew who it was? They would enter into, personal destruction. They would go after these people's livelihoods. If they have other jobs, they would absolutely attempt to destroy them. Not the America that I am used to. But that's where we are today. And matter of fact, and some of you may be saying, nope, won't happen. Yes, it will. I saw it happen when we were dealing with Prop 8 a few years ago. I know people that donated or gave to the Prop 8 movement. And their businesses were attacked. They were harassed at their homes. Their clientele was called and contacted to drop services. They tried to destroy these people. Frankly, that should be a crime. That doesn't enter into, destroying somebody's livelihood does not enter into, in my opinion, free speech. It is a crime. And I think that many of these people should have been charged with the crime when they were contacting people because somebody did something political they didn't like. Go ahead and voice your opinion, but don't try to destroy the person. I think it's wrong. Something I want to go to quickly is, because it's a big deal, is high-speed rail. Now, we hear a lot of people talking about the fact this is a boondoggle, and it is. It's money that is just going to be a continuous waste of tens of billions of dollars. And yet, we have a governor that is just hell-bent on this putting, and forcing this high-speed rail project on the taxpayers of California. And I came up with a name for it, basically, and I think it's ultimately going to be known as this, and that's Jerry's Folly. Or it could be a brown day in California's history. Or Brown's Big Dig, because this is surely his deal, folks. I don't believe without the backing of Brown this would have succeeded. But he, like I say, is just hell-bent on proceeding with this project. Tens of billions of dollars on a train that right now would be going from nowhere. Going from, I believe it's Merced or Madera, I can't remember, I think it's Madera to Bakersfield, 100 and something miles. I'm not sure what they're putting out now, the billions of dollars. I think it's projected to be something like, 9 billion, 8 billion, something like this. That includes the trains to run on it, or some of the infrastructure that needs to be put in. Chances are the lawsuits are going to run that by the time they're all filed, and the time, the project's going to be given the go-ahead. You're going to have farmers, you're going to have various, probably small towns filing lawsuits. This isn't over by any means, and nor is it going to be as cheap as they think it's going to be. So now they're calling it, of course, a jobs program. Now, if we look at the renewable energy profession and the money they've put into creating jobs, it's anyway, depending on how you want to look at it, but about the minimum per job cost in the renewable energy area is $1.7 million per job is what it's taken to create that job. Now, I've said so many times, would you just give me the $1.7 million? Because I could do wondrous things with $1.7 million. And I will guarantee you that I would create many, many jobs with that $1.7 million that's going to creating one job on federal subsidies. Absolutely mind-boggling. But anyway, what's also interesting about the high-speed rail is that when this all started, France offered to come in as a consultant and help California put this together based on their experience with high-speed rail in France. And Japan also did the same thing. And guess what? California experts says, no. We can do this ourselves. We don't need your help. And of course, Jerry Brown has now deemed himself, engineer, on this whole thing. He actually said this, I will re-engineer this. And he did. And a few weeks later, he came back and says, you know what? It's not going to be $100 billion on this on this project. It's going to be $68 billion. What a bunch of hocus pocus. It's not going to be. You're talking hundreds of billions of dollars over the next number of decades to try and do this. Now, I interviewed the other day Dan Lundgren, a couple of times, matter of fact. I've had him on my show. And I asked him a simple question, real simple question, and I said, will Congress fund this high-speed rail? And he said, based on how Congress feels right now and the spending of money, and we're borrowing 43 cents on every dollar, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't see Congress funding this train in California. And of course, other states have opted out. But they've been under pressure here in California and in Congress, by the way. And matter of fact, my understanding is right here in Sacramento, we had the Senate and the Assembly. Nancy Pelosi literally was actually making calls to our state legislators, kind of, twisting their arms to vote for this on these votes that were kind of on the fence. They know they should vote against this, but you got Pickpocket Perez and Darrell Spinberg, breathing heavily, right into their faces and saying, if you don't, you're working out of your trunk of your car in the remainder of your stint here in the dome. So, consequently, they were able to finagle it through the Senate, I believe, with one vote. So, it's just, again, it gets right back to an amazing thing. But something I want to mention here, because this really kind of hits it on the head in computer systems and everything else here in California, where they've lost billions of dollars. And this is what the French were basically saying. It says, it's like California is trying to design and build a Boeing 747 instead of going out and buying one. And it says, it's actually a Dan McNamara, a civil engineer who worked for an SNCF's U.S. affiliate, French. There are lots of questions about the Parsons-Brinkerhoff plan. The capital costs are way too high, and the route has been politically gerrymandered. Kind of like all of our political districts and so on, gerrymandered. Well, they're doing the same thing on this route, and it's going to be incredibly expensive and politically explosive here in California. But that's what we get. Here again, we voted for it, we're getting it, and they're going to cram these billions of dollars down our throats. It's also too expensive to ride. And you look at the low population density in the valley where this is going, Bakersfield, Merced, Madera, wherever that is, 110 miles, I think, for billions and billions of dollars. Who's going to pay to ride this train? It's going to have to be subsidized. These people aren't going to afford to ride. Matter of fact, who would pay to go from Madera to Bakersfield? What's the cost going to be? Are we going to have a return on our investment? I doubt it. We are going to have to be subsidizing every single ticket on into the future on this train. And ultimately, I have my thoughts. This won't occur. We're going to have rails with no trains, running. It's going to be much like the city of Stockton, refurbishing a building to move into, but then they can't afford to move into it. And it sits there and ultimately is taken over by bankruptcy courts. The banks take it back. That was Stockton for you. That's ultimately going to be California. So, you know, it's just, like I say, it's so frustrating. And we're going to be on a break here in a moment. But when we come back, we're going to be talking about Farm Workers Safety Act of 2012, AB 2346. And if you want to look in the face of stupidity, this is it. And it can actually kill farmers, literally kill farming here in California, especially for the small farmer, the mom and pop operations, small acreages. So when we come back, we're going to talk about AB 2346. I'm Mark Montgomery. We'll be back in a moment.
The Mark Montgomery Show.
Welcome back, folks. I'm Mark Montgomery. AB 2346. Remember it. AB 2346. Call your legislature. Tell them to shoot this down. Now, by the way, it is passing, and I don't know whether Jerry Brown will vote for this or veto this or not. Farm Workers Safety Act of 2012, and it's put on by a Democrat out of Los Angeles by the name of Betsy Butler. And this is one of the most insane pieces of legislation I have seen in a long time. And matter of fact, it's on a par with Louis Alijo tying minimum wage to the consumer price index. Wages can go up, but if the consumer price index comes down, well, the wages can't come down. So they're just stuck at the higher rate even though we're in depression or something. Insanity. But then I think that's how many of these lawmakers are. I think they're insane. This is the only place they can, I guess, appear legitimate for some reason. They ought to be in an insane asylum as far as I'm concerned. It's just mind-boggling. This is one of them. Think about this for a moment. This is a bill that, and the only thing I can say that this must be, it must be a payoff to unions in some way, because it's going to cause the, number one, prices to skyrocket, having to do with farm workers, and then of course if farm workers go up, it takes more to get the crops out of the field because of all these requirements. That's going to mean that food is going to be far more expensive to you at the grocery store. So I want to get into it. I'm not sure I'll have enough time to totally cover the whole thing, but we'll talk about it again because this to me is a big deal. It says, on May 28th, the California Assembly began the process of unraveling substantial progress made over the nearly 7 years by California agriculture to improve heat illness protection. Heat illness protection for agricultural workers by passing AB 2346. Farm Workers Safety Act of 2012 will make many detrimental changes in the heat illness prevention regulations that the Cal OSHA Standards Board adopted in 2005. Now, like many things that I talk about, the Cal OSHA, when it comes to setting standards regarding heat illness, etc., on the farm, has had a lot of latitude. You know, the legislature will come through, they'll come and pass something that is just stupid. Downright stupid. It doesn't work, it's not going to work, costs a lot of money, and really accomplishes nothing. OSHA has had the ability to say, you know what, that's not going to work, we're not going to enforce that, period. This bill now, the latest one by Betsy Butler, takes that ability to soften maybe rules and regulations, to make it more practical on the farm, and says Cal OSHA can no longer do this. So the law stands, and you've got to abide by it. The rules stand. No one can modify it. I mean, here's how stupid it is. It says, here we go. Disallow effective drinking water replenishment procedures for providing employees with cool water throughout a shift. Instead, all drinking water required for a crew, 1 quart per employee per hour during a shift, would have to be present when the shift starts. For a crew of 50, for example, a farmer would have to have 125 gallons of water on hand first thing in the morning and somehow keep it cool throughout a 10-hour shift. Goes on, says require employees to lug with them as they work throughout the day, insulated water containers to keep drinking water at a temperature of no more than 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Try that in 115-degree weather in Bakersfield, out on the farm, out in the fields. But it's requiring, now so you're a farm laborer, now you've got to lug the water around with you. And you have to be able to keep it, and this would be the responsibility of the farmer, that somehow they've got to be able to keep that water that you're carrying around at 70 degrees. I don't know what you're going to do. You're going to carry around a cooler of some kind. It says require an employee to track time. Now this is a big one, folks. Require an employer to track time spent by employees getting drinking water to ensure they do not lose wages during that time, an impossible administrative burden. So you're out working a farm, you're out in the middle of a field, you're thirsty now, you don't want to get a heat stroke, so now you say, I guess you raise your hand or something, or call on a cell phone or something, says, okay, I'm going to get a drink. So they have to keep track of the time now that it took from you walking from the middle of the field over to get your water, drink your water, and then back to the location you were, I suppose, out in the field. It's impossible to keep that. What if you have 20, 23, 24, or 150 people leaving the field at different times within a 2-hour period of time? And you've now got to keep track of all that time that they have taken now to get a drink of water, to make sure they're paid for that time instead of just taking a break. Amazing. Goes on, require that an area of shade for employees have a temperature that is significantly lower than the ambient temperature outside of that area. Require an employer to have one or more areas of shade to accommodate all employees on a shift at all times with no temperature trigger, indicating that AB 2346 intends to allow all ag employees to rest in shade at all times, even on a sunny but cold winter day. So what this is saying is that it doesn't make any difference whether it's winter or summer, they've got to supply the shade. Period. Now what does this mean? Shaded areas must be no more than 200 feet from any employee. With employees scattered throughout a field, 1/4 mile square, a farmer would have to furnish 26 areas of shade around the field's perimeter and another 36 shaded areas within it, a total of 62 shaded areas in all. Can you imagine? You've got a farm. And before you can put farm workers out there working that farm, you have to put in 62 shaded areas, whether it's sunny or not. Impossible. Require employees to take paid 15-minute rest breaks every 2 hours when the temperature is 80 degrees or above. 80 degrees? That's cool here in the valley during the summer. I mean, it feels like winter. So it says require employees to take paid 15-minute rest breaks every 2 hours when the temperature is 80 degrees or above. Require an employee to be transported to medical care in an air-conditioned vehicle or ambulance starting within 5 minutes of showing signs of heat stress. If it would take more than 5 minutes for an ambulance to arrive at the work site, the employer would have to assume the risk of transporting the employee to the nearest hospital. Goes on to say, these unreasonable requirements would be locked in the labor code, denying Cal-OSHA Standards Board the ability to revise them appropriately as it did with its heat illness prevention standard in 2010. It enables employees to sue their employer for alleged non-compliance with the new law. Can you imagine the attorneys that are going to be sitting out there on all these farms? Pretty soon you'll have a bill that all attorneys have to have shade, have to have water now supplied by the rancher, the farmer, kept at 70 degrees so that they can watch over now and make sure that the time now is kept track of from them leaving the field to get a drink of water and back to their position in field, and that it's probably within a second or two of accuracy. Or a lawsuit. much like ADA. Now, interesting, and I want to get this point in. What's this all about? It's about unions. Now, I actually used these numbers talking about the ADA, American Disabilities Act, but I pulled these numbers. Top 10 recipients of trial lawyer money. Guess who one of the top recipients of money is? Why? Nobody other than Betsy Butler, Democrat out of Los Angeles, which backs and is rewriting AB 2346. Guess what? In the last short period of time, she received $131,636 from trial lawyers. Now, how much have they given her in all? She is only second to Pickpocket Perez with $929,072 given to this lady. You wonder why she is writing stuff like this. She's getting paid to do it. Now, who's second? That is Pickpocket Perez. He has received $115,300 just recently, between January 2011 and 2012. But in all, get this, Pickpocket Perez, in this short period of time he's actually been in the Assembly, has received $1,678,037, and you wonder why he's in the pockets of the unions. Darrell Spinberg, he's received $113,992 in this period of time, but in all, $734,543 from the unions. Trial lawyers. Amazing numbers, and you wonder why everything in this state is geared towards trial lawyers, environmentalists, and unions, the government unions. You wonder why we get nothing done in this state other than tax and spend, sucking money out of the private sector, feeding into the government to come up with bills like AB 2346. Or